Enjoy every sandwich. That was one of the many colorful shreds of wisdom bestowed upon the world by musician and songwriter Warren Zevon. He was smart, cutting, and could throw a phrase together like no one else. Exceptionally gifted, yet exceptionally haunted. He was manic, violent, alcoholic, and fearless. He was the Hunter S. Thompson of music who occupied a space somewhere between Bob Dylan and Tom Waits. So hang on to your pina coladas, because we're going to check out some of the people, haunts, and locations that made it all happen. Warren Zevon was born in Chicago, but spent most of his childhood right here in L.A. His father's name was Willie Stumpy Zevon, great name, and he was a low-level gangster that worked for mob boss Mickey Cohen, and he ran numbers for him. He collected on collateral that he would fence for him, and as a matter of fact, Warren's first piano was won by his father in a poker game. Very fitting, I think. By the time he was just 13 years old, Warren had mastered the piano to the extent that his junior high music teacher had finagled a meeting with legendary composer Igor Stravinsky and his protege Robert Kraft right here at this house. They met on several occasions, but it had a big consequence on Warren because he was thinking about dropping piano entirely to take up guitar because it was, more rock and roll friendly. After meeting Stravinsky, who was really the Elvis Presley of classical music, it re-energized Warren to the piano and to orchestra, and throughout the rest of his life, Warren would strive, albeit somewhat unsuccessfully, to compose the great classical score, and some of it would pop up in bits and pieces on his records like Interlude No. 1 did on Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School. But he didn't take studying music to the nth degree. Warren was somewhat superstitious. He was a little afraid of being Juilliarded, as he called it, overeducated in music, where it would just be technological and no more feel left to it. But anyways, Igor Stravinsky. So we're on Melrose in Fairfax right now, and this is Fairfax High. And for all intents and purposes, this is where Warren Zevon's road to stardom began. Warren had a self-proclaimed genius IQ, and his motto about school was, keep your mouth shut and you'll get an A. One day he was hanging out here in the courtyard with his guitar, playing a little bit of music, and he caught the ear of a student. Her name was Laura Kenyon, and she thought he was great. And one thing led to another. They got together and started doing some Beatles songs. As a few months went by, they started playing parties, and they caught the ear of someone at White Whale Records. In short order, they were signed and put out a record as Lime and Sibel. Warren penned the songs, and they released a single called Follow Me, and it did okay in the charts, but the real action was on the B-side. It was a song called Like the Seasons, and no one at the time really cared about it except for an unknown band named the Turtles, who decided to make it the B-side to their mega hit record, Happy Together. And the money that Warren made off that really sustained him up until the 70s. Better place to talk about Warren Zevon than a tiki bar in North Hollywood, right? By the early 70s, he was making ends meet by playing the occasional studio gig, and he was doing jingles too. He did a commercial for Boone's Farm Wine at the time. But his real break came when Phil and Don Everly took a liking to him, and he became their musical director. And one of his first hires was up-and-coming guitarist Waddy Wachtel. They got off to a bad start. Basically, it was two smartasses in the room, with Warren tried to get the upper hand by playing a classic bit and daring Waddy to identify it. And as luck would have it, it was the only classic Waddy knew. And as he left the audition, his parting words to Warren were Beethoven's Fifth in G, asshole. And they, of course, became instant best friends. Now, this is just my own private opinion, but I've always found Warren's songs to be joyful and tragic at the same time, and they've always reminded me of Irish folk songs. And I think he is somewhat the American version of Shane MacGowan from the Pogues. But more recently, his son Jordan has said that he felt his father's perspective was the world was pretty effed up. But look at that flower growing out of this crack of the cement over there, which I think is great. So we're here in the heart of Laurel Canyon now, in the Kirkwood Bowl. We're on Ridpath. And this was the home of rock impresario Barry Friedman, also known as Fraser Mohawk, who in 1968 or 69 introduced Jackson Browne to Warren Zevon, and it happened right here. They played each other their songs, and Warren described it as two gunslingers at high noon trying to outduel each other. But it was to be one of the most important connections of Warren Zevon's career. Jackson Browne would soon begin his recording career and would use all his gravity to persuade Asylum Records label president David Geffen to sign Warren Zevon and let Jackson produce it. It was an absolutely stunning debut album, and it included guest spots by the Eagles, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys, and of course his compadre Waddy Wachtel. So Warren's first record for Asylum was the eponymously titled Warren Zevon, and it was fairly brilliant. It contained songs like Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me, but I think my favorite song from the record was called Desperados Under the Eaves. It's one of those great songs about Los Angeles. I think every bit as good as I Love L.A. by Randy Newman or L.A. Woman by The Doors. But it takes place here at the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel. So let's check it out. The song begins with the line, I was at the Hollywood Hawaiian staring into my empty coffee cup. Well, this used to be the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel. Back in the day, this was one of the more drug-fueled, flea-bitten, wonderful rock and roll inns that there were. And of course, this is where Warren Zevon lived for part of the time. He had an affinity for flea-bitten hotels, either because it was all he could afford or because he really dug it. There's a pretty good story about Warren escaping his hotel bill here by squeezing through the bathroom window and shimmying down the fire escape. And to paraphrase Desperados, if California falls into the ocean the way the mystics and statistics say it will, I predict that this hotel will be standing until I pay my bill. The Hollywood Hawaiian. The last line of Desperados Under the Eaves, sung with that melancholy hymnal quality Warren just owned, was Look Away Down Gower Avenue, Look Away. And if you walk down Yucca Street just a few blocks from where we were at the Hollywood Hawaiian, you'll come to Gower Street and see what he was talking about for yourself. The street is the real dividing line separating what's Hollywood myth and Hollywood reality. If you go south, you'll see what used to be Columbia Pictures at the Gower Sunset Studios, and then down another few blocks to Paramount and all its pompous and fake glory. But take Gower just a couple of minutes north towards the 101 freeway, and you'll see the most graphic testament to the duality of society today. Warren was nothing if not a prophet of what was soon to emerge from the darkest of our shadows. So we're in Echo Park, right on the corner of Alvarado and Sunset. And if you've watched any old Warren vids, you've seen the Burrito King right here. And this was a favorite hangout in Echo Park of rockers back in the day. It still is, quite frankly. So let's check it out. Hi, can I get a carne asada, a burrito, please, and a medium Diet Coke? You know, outside of Bible study, I don't think anyone's words have been more dissected than Warren Zevon's. And, you know, trying to find the duality and the inner meaning of those words and all that other kind of groovy junk. But in Carmelita, he references scoring heroin here on Alvarado Street at the Pioneer Chicken that used to exist down there. It no longer is there. In my day, it was over on Vermont and Hollywood Boulevard, and it was open 24 hours and was the place to score drugs. But, you know, the better times. Anyways, burrito cake. In 1979, Warren spent one of his legendary benders here at the Chateau Marmont. And from John Belushi to Roman Polanski, this place was, and still is, the favorite hotel for any number of successful entertainment outlaws. And Warren stayed here for a month after a breakup with his then-wife, Crystal. It was just him and the bottle and his .44 Magnum, which he would occasionally rid of its ammo by firing off the balcony across Sunset Boulevard at a billboard, which at the time was advertising the heartwarming comedic talents of Richard Pryor. And Warren could often be seen staggering in and out of his next-door neighbor's suite, occupied at the time by none other than Mick Jagger's then-wife, Bianca. In his rare moments of lucidity, he began writing the songs for what would become Bad Luck Streak and Dancing School. But his residency here at the Chateau ended with yet another residency in a Santa Barbara rehab. And speaking of residencies, Warren finally got sober in 1986 and stayed so until his very last weeks of residency here on planet Earth. So this is the Sound Factory, and in 1977, Warren recorded his most commercially successful record here, Excitable Boy. It took 9 months to record because Warren agonized over every single lyric, which is somewhat ironic because the most successful song of the album, and his entire career for that matter, was Werewolves of London, and it was written in literally 15 minutes at a party. At first they tried recording Werewolves with a rhythm section of Russ Kunkel on drums and Bob Glaub on bass, and eventually combinations of pretty much everybody from the Mellow Mafia. But Warren thought it too slick. It didn't sound, as he put it, stupid enough for him. And it wasn't until Mick Fleetwood and John McVie from Fleetwood Mac dropped by to the studio one night that they found the right combination. And they ended up doing 60 different takes of the song. They ended up with the second one. I think Mick Fleetwood and John McVie were used to this kind of stuff, and 60 takes to them was a day at the beach. Months went by before they mixed, and Warren came up with one last line for the song, and it was, I saw a werewolf drinking a pina colada Trader Vic's, and his hair was perfect, which is my favorite line of the song. But Warren was less than thrilled when he found out that Asylum was releasing Werewolves as their lead single. He thought of it as somewhat of a joke song, but sometimes it doesn't always pay to be the smartest guy in the room, and I think this was one of those cases. Anyways, the Sound Factory. The Roxy here on the Sunset Strip was pretty much Warren's go-to place to play, and they were always raucous, star-studded affairs. By the late 70s, Warren's alcoholism was spiraling out of control, sometimes in spectacular fashion, and it became almost a sport to see if he could make it through a show without having to be carried off stage. I think a lot of people put up with it for a long, long time because he was so singularly talented, but in the end it proved too much for all but a few of his most loyal friends and co-workers. He finally found sobriety in 1986 and began the long journey of reclaiming his life and career. As he once most succinctly put it, I got to be Jim Morrison for a lot longer than he did. So Warren Zevon's lasting legacy will probably be Werewolves of London, even though he recorded over 14 records throughout his career, and he was thought of as somewhat of the F. Scott Fitzgerald of rock and roll. He appeared on the David Letterman show so many times that when it was revealed that he had terminal cancer, Letterman devoted an entire show to Warren Zevon. And one of the questions he asked him on that show was, had your diagnosis changed your attitude about life? And Warren said, yes, it's made me enjoy every sandwich. And I think those are words to live by. So I want to thank you for hanging out with us. It's been my complete pleasure doing a vid about somebody that I respect and love as much as Warren. And I must say, though, even though I've done an entire vid on him here, he's still somewhat of an enigma, which I think is a cool thing. So it's at this point that I'd like to shamelessly ask you for your subscription to the channel, if you haven't done it already. We've got a lot of great videos on tap, and I think we got some stuff in the library you might enjoy too. Thanks to Warren Zevon for all the great music and stories, and keep playing it and keep playing it loud. All right, peace out, goodbye.